Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Festival of Storytellers Roundtable table sessions. So, welcome, authors, the star of this show. All of you guys are so amazing. I have been watching your live booth sessions. So, to start this off, from the top of the list, why don't you guys show a copy of your book and tell us a bit about it before we get started?
Right now. Just 1 second.
What-
Hey everyone, my name is Brenda Crosby. I'm from South Carolina. The title of my book is The Day My Life Changed, an Accident Survivor. It is about a horrific accident that I was involved in that nearly took my life and left me with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go to Barbara.
Hi, my name is Barbara Hannon, and this is my book. It's called Here. It's called Letters from World War II. This is a story of what my parents went through during World War II. It's a true story. It's the story of the war years, and it's a kind of a mystery and what happened to my father during the war, how my parents got through it, based a lot of it on the letters they wrote each other. So it's a lot of history. Even though it's a true story, I had to do a lot of imagining because when I wrote it, my father is no longer alive and I couldn't really ask him what happened. I had to go through his letters and the historical events and what happened, the prison camp, all of this kind of stuff to put the story together. So, historical book.
Thank you, Barbara. All right. Tony, if you can unmute yourself, please. Tell us about your book. Show us a copy of it.
Sure. My name is Tony Candela, and this is not historical fiction either, unfortunately. This is a memoir, which, if you understand the concept of memoir, does not always mean you have complete accuracy. But for those references to things that truly happened in history, especially when I was tracing my parents' generation through the Great Depression and World War II, I was endeavoring to get as much factual information as I possibly could, so that the foundation of that part of my book was solid. And I look forward to hearing from other people about how they put their books together. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. All right, Louis, please unmute yourself and tell us about your book.
My name is Louis Panagatopoulos. My book is Great Mandala, and it's a story of a couple who, starting in 1970, fight for social change. And the book spans from 1970 into the 2000s. And that's one of the things I hope to learn in this meeting is when does historical fiction begin? This one starts in 1970. Is that history, or do we have to go into the 1800s to be history? I hope we can talk about that a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Louis. And next one is Reverend Michael Lavery.
Lavery.
Oh, you're muted. Oh,
Yeah.
there.
My name is Reverend Michael Lavery. The name of my book is Lucius, A Soldier's Journey, A Man's Search for Truth. And it's about a Roman soldier, basically, a Roman soldier, the centurion of Matthew chapter 8. I gave him a name. Of course, in the Bible, he doesn't have a name. I gave him a name. And his search for the truth. He's a Roman soldier, but yet he's got a lot of questions about the way Rome administers its territories and its conquered territories and subjugated territories. And he's seeking truth. He knows there must be a better way, but he doesn't know what it is. So this is his search to find the truth, and actually, in the end, his finding truth.
Thank you, Reverend. And next one is Dr. Russ Hill.
Thank you. Well, I have more than one book. My first book was Medical Investigation 101. And my most recent book is Why Did Buffy's Fur Go Flat? And they both emanated from, so I spent 20 years in my medical career, retired from that, and eventually decided to teach in public school system. And I had available an opportunity to teach medical science and environmental science. And so as a result of these courses, I had to develop my own curriculum because no one else had produced anything. So I co-conspired with my cousin, a retired anesthesiologist, for Medical Investigation 101. And it became an entire curriculum of 3 books, a workbook and a teacher's edition that has sold actually in 4 continents. And this most recent book, I had this idea from my environmental science class, and I wrote the story about a cat who became ill and went to a veterinarian, or was taken to a veterinarian who discovered that the animal might be sick from the environment and from eating things that came from a toxic environment. And then the happy ending is that the young lady, owner of the cat, finds her voice to produce change in society, and a happy ending. So I think, and to answer Louis' question, I have an idea that history starts today. As soon as it's gone, as soon as that moment's gone, it's history. I think both of my books are historical. They're both literally, to me, there's a fine line between fiction and nonfiction, because my books are based on science, but they're fictional stories. And to me, I always get confused. Is it fiction or is it nonfiction? But I know the literal definition for that they use, for classifying your book, but I don't necessarily agree with it. But anyway, thank you for introducing my books.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Yeah, I was also wondering, when does history start? And thank you for enlightening us about that. So why don't we go to Clarence this time?
Hi, my name is Clarence Cosby. I am the author of the book Armageddon, and basically it's the book about like the whole end times where three friends, they wind up going, crazy things start happening, people start disappearing. Some people think it's like some kind of weird weather going on. One person's trying to use the Bible. They all trying to like dismiss him, but he's like, no, like this is really what's going on. And then all craziness happens. There's destruction everywhere, death everywhere, and it's like it's pretty much like a supernatural but religious type horror type situation. Even though like the Bible says one thing, I definitely like depicted in a very graphic type of way of what would really happen if we were still like if it was happening like right now.
Hey, thank you, Clarence. And Lonnie, I know you don't have a camera, but if you can please mention the title of your book, what it is all about.
Hi, I'm Lonnie Bray-Ill, author of, I'm a nonfiction writer. Actually, I'm a top-rated nonfiction writer. Author of Moorish American Nationality Keys of the Moorish American Institute. It's my first publication. It's number 17 and number 27 in the world out of 668,000 some odd books for administrative law, indigenous peoples, and court records procedures. Yeah, that's my number one book.
That's good. Thank you, guys. And you guys, you authors, I consider you as gifts to the world. You're giving us inspiration, motivation. You're entertaining us. May it be a fiction book or self help, religious. Thank you guys for really being passionate about your work. Now, before we go to our topic, again, it's called authenticity in historical fiction. Um, you guys can answer the question if you're able to relate that much. If you cannot relate that much, that's fine. If you have an opinion, you can also raise your hand. I'll call your attention, and then we can go ahead and share our insights. I'm sure we'll be really great with this round table discussion. So again, authenticity in historical fiction. There are 10 elements to consider when writing historical fiction. So I'll just enumerate all of these. So the first one is your purpose, and then your research, the setting, the characters, the plot, the conflict, dialogue, description, theme, and the 10th one is world building. So, an example of this is that when I was a bit young, I was hooked and very much confused if this is really a real event or if this is just a fictional, novel. So it's called The Da Vinci's Code. So it drove me nuts. I had to research if this is really real, and it was. It's really a blend of fact and fiction. So I'm going to ask a question. Did you guys, have you read a book that actually made you question as well, or maybe fascinated you that it's a combination of fact or fiction? Again, for me, it was Dan Brown's The Da Vinci's Code, just one of them, really. And it also opened my mind to conspiracy theories. So I got addicted and hooked to those things as well in the past. So Tony, why don't we start with you? Like a book that
Great.
fascinates you, that's a blend of fact and fiction.
Your voice was garbled a little bit at the
Yeah.
end.
Oh, okay.
Well,
So,
I agree with you that Dan Brown, that was the book that made me first question whether a book was real or not. I remember that one specifically. And you're right, that one, I ended up doing the same thing, trying to find out, is this real or not? Because it was so intriguing.
yeah, it definitely was. I can't put it down. I just had to read it in one sitting. And then after that, I had to do some research. It took me months, you know. Um, did you have, how about the rest of you guys? Anyone can answer a book that entertained you the most, where, you questioned life, you questioned history. Um,
Hmm.
Well, I can answer. I like to read historical novels. I like to read them, and I don't know if any of you have ever read 1776 about the Revolutionary War. It's a great book, but when I read that, I was consumed with all these stories in the book and thought, did this really happen? Did George Washington really do this? So then, it starts you on this quest to try to do a little research and find out, did this really happen? And it, to me, is really kind of exciting when you find out, yeah, it really happened. And it's things people don't know about that you only get from the story. But I like it when writers are able to pique your interest to such an extent that you're out there trying to figure out, did that really happen? Did he really say that? Did they really? So I think that is an excellent mark of a good writer, if they can kind of fictionalize almost a real historical event and get somebody so interested that they get out there and go read, see if it was true.
That reminded me of one, because I was lost to think of any book, but a book by Gore Vidal called Burr, and it's the famous Burr that's in the Hamilton now. That is I think that's an incredible book. He fictional, there's some fictional characters to move the story along, but George Washington's in the movie, in the book. Martin Van Buren's in the book. He proposes that actually that I think it was Hamilton or one of those people was actually Martin Van Buren's love child. So it really piques a lot of interest in that. And the opening scene basically is George Washington. The soldiers are making fun of him because he has a big butt. And I don't know if that was true or not, but it really was great entertainment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the mark of a really good author who's writing his historical stuff is to be able to do that, to be able to take something that was true, maybe expand it a little bit, and really get your interest.
Yeah.
To the point where I got to go figure that. Was that true? Did he really say that? That's a make reading fun.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a recommended book for anybody who wants some history of the U.S. in those days.
I have a question. The Da Vinci Code, is that the book where it's saying that Jesus is married to Mary Magdalene? Is that the same book?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So what do y'all think about that?
I think it has some credibility. There's some historical credibility.
You think it's credible?
There's some historical credibility. First off, he's pointing out the artwork that the figure to the immediate right of the Jesus figure is a woman, right? Is that
well? That's been a question.
I didn't read the book
in the Last Supper.
About it.
That's
maybe I didn't say the book, but in the Last Supper,
hundreds of years.
Yes.
Is that? Can we agree that that's a woman? Is that accepted?
I don't know.
Don't know.
I don't know.
All right.
All the men in that
this
picture
idea?
had long hair.
Just an idea. How about this idea? Typically, whenever Jesus went to this one town, there was two women he stayed with, two Marys. Mary and Salma, and Mary washed the Lord's feet with her hair while Salma cooked food. When the sepulcher was pulled back,
their brother's name was Lazarus.
When the sepulcher was pulled back, the disciples were not there, but there was three women there: Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and a third woman.
So
these are things they were there to perform sacred ceremonies, the last rite ceremonies, the death ceremonies that can only be performed by family. Mary Magdalene was there.
Well, I never heard of Selma. I mean, who's this Selma person? I mean, she's not listed in the Bible or anything.
Yeah, yeah. You can Google. You can do Bible lookup and do anything and find anything. Everywhere
But
where
she's
one
not
word is mentioned in the
a
Bible,
virgin of the Bible.
That's the
I'm
joy
here
of
today to
historical
learn. I don't know too much about historical fiction.
fiction.
That's why I'm here
You can
today
see
to
what you
learn.
want if you make a strong
these are
enough
the things
story.
that the author points out. Is all I'm saying. I'm not arguing one way or another. I'm just
Oh
having
no,
fun
I'm
with it.
not arguing.
But
I'm
that's
just
what's
here to
pointed
learn.
out.
I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, well, you should read the Da Vinci Code, the book. It's a lot different than the movie, and step by
Afraid
step,
to.
he gets into symbols. For example, triangles, whether they're pointed upside or down or
Oh no, no.
upside down.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Well,
Thank
symbolism, art,
you,
art.
Miss
You shouldn't be
Connie.
afraid of
Connie,
art.
thank you.
Hey, this
Thank
is
you.
Tony. Changing the subject, some of my favorite historical fiction authors go way back. In the 80s, I used to be crazy about a guy named Gary Jennings, and he wrote books like Texas and Aztec and Spangle, the post-Civil War era in the United States, the circus, Raptor, which was about a bisexual character who was an Ostrogoth, I guess, in medieval Europe, and then the other favorite one was James Michener.
Oh yeah, he's
Hawaii.
Hawaii, Alaska, I can't ever, Chesapeake. I can't even remember the name.
Tales of the South Pacific is a really
Mhm.
accurate, frightening book about what went on out there during
Yeah.
World War II.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll be honest with you. I read these things as much to learn the history. You can tease out the real history from the fictional stuff pretty easily, and then if you want to double check something, you can. But I read these things as much to learn about history as I do to have fun reading them.
So you just need to read them and take them
me
as
too.
a grain of salt.
I take it with a tiny grain of salt, mostly realistic, except for the plot elements and the characters that they've woven in. And very often the author will tell you somewhere, either in the beginning of the book or at the end of the book, they will take the care to tell you what they've fictionalized totally and where they tried to stay closer to true fact. So you get that sometimes, and it's an element of historical fiction that helps you to relax while you're reading these books, because you're supposed to be having fun reading this stuff, and so all that analysis kind of for me takes away from it. But if I ever was wondering about a piece of that history, I would definitely look it up.
I'll stick to nonfiction.
Yeah, historical fiction.
Yeah. Reverend Lever? Yeah.
Concerning the Da Vinci Code, it never caused me much of a problem because I saw an interview with the author, and he honestly said he could not believe the amount of hubbub that was stirred up because of it. He said, the History Channel made a whole series on it, and he said he could never understand why they spent all that money, because he said it was a fiction, and he said he made it very clear it was a fiction. I have to say he did quite an excellent job. I mean, he took a fiction and he made it so realistic people believed it was real, but he himself said it was a fiction, and I can't see why people are getting so hot and bothered about it and why they're writing Tom Hanks nasty letters. He said, I don't understand it. I made it very clear that it's a fiction. It is not based on realistic fact. Although,
but if you
have
look
some
at people right now today, if you look at people today, one of the things that really gets people going, they get involved in, is conspiracy theories. There's conspiracy theories in politics, and there's been a lot written about the kind of people that get so hooked into this. They want explanations of something that may not be able to be explained. They want these conspiracy theories, and that's why the book was so, to me, it's no different than people who are involved in QAnon and all this craziness. People
crazy stuff.
People who live maybe what they think this kind of boring everyday life go down the rabbit hole with this and think that they then have special knowledge about what's going on. It's if you're going to write a best-selling book, tap into something like that. But that's why it was so, and it stimulates unbelievable conversations. You know,
I think one of these apostles at the Last Supper looks like Lee Oswald, actually. So maybe conspiracy theory.
Please.
Time traveling. So all of the things that
if I hear another conspiracy theory about John F. Kennedy's assassination, I think I'm going to pull what little hair I have left out.
Right, but
what about Elvis is still alive?
Interests people so much, and
then
they think that they have this secret, special knowledge that JFK is alive, and nobody else knows. And it just, you know, for people who get up and have a boring life, it just gives them something to do.
Well, plus it sells books. I mean, that's the thing of it sells books.
It does.
Bingo.
That's true.
And if you think of how many books have been sold with about Hitler, how many, you know, such a vile person, but thousands of books, I think it's been, you know, deal with him and the stuff he's done. It's, you know, I don't know what it is about human nature, but
I don't know. I don't. People just want to believe something else. They just, and so many people want an explanation of what's happening right now that's like out of this world.
I don't even want to bring up UFOs.
Oh,
no. Yeah. But I think, you know, for me, the books that are most successful are books that maybe start with some historical event and that's maybe fictionalized, but the better the history is and the more authentic it is, the more liable people are to accept it and believe it, like the Da Vinci Code. The fact that there's so many authentic historical things in that book, places, symbols, paintings, statues, it's authentic. So then you begin to go down that rabbit hole.
It's crazy to me.
Yeah, the last historical fiction book I read was a lady. It's an old book, a series of books, the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, and I just read the first book because I want to read other things, and I could be reading the Outlander series forever because there's so much material. But it goes to that last element of the 10 elements. The world building. So she gets to a time in Scotland just before the time of the American Revolution, because I think the characters end up in the American Revolution somehow or other in one of the other books, and you know, it's all about the Scottish clans and their enmity with the British and the family life and just a whole lot of things. And you know, it starts out with a woman who's a nurse around the time of just after World War II, who somehow manages to get knocked back into time. Same geography, but way back in time. And then she builds forward from there. And now there in lies, I think, not only are you building the entire world that this is taking place in, then she widens the world geographically, but I can imagine that she had to do a heck of a lot of research just to get it accurate and everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. but I think that, her books are so valuable. A lot of people believe that history is very dry, that, it's only dates and it's only, a lot of people don't like to study history because it's so dry to them. But you take an author like her who does time travel, it's time travel in her books.
Yes.
And suddenly you are able to interest somebody who maybe could care less about British and Scottish history, and they're just enamored. So I have to tell you that after she wrote her books, I happened to be in Scotland. And this place where they had the stones, they had to finally rope it off and put fences up because thousands of people made the trek over there to stand by the stones and rub the stone, whatever. They maybe were going to travel back in time, but that her books did that, get everybody interested.
All right. I know you guys are so engaged with our topic, but it's time for us to pause for a break. And you can go and get a water or coffee if you like. So please stand by. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you liked our little commercial. Okay. So let's I'll just wait for Clarence. All right, there he is. Okay. So
Can I say
moving to a
something?
different question, guys. When considering historical, oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'd like to, maybe if you could repeat the 10 elements of historical writing, and maybe go around and each person pick one element and talk about how that's influenced their book. I think it's more relevant to talk about our stuff than it is people we don't know.
Agreed.
It's just me, but
Sure. Sure. So the 10 elements is the first one, your purpose. Why do you want your readers to learn? What do you want your leaders to learn from your story or about a time or event in history? Number one, of course, number two is research. 3, the setting. The story takes place in a particular time period in history. Your characters and plot. 6 is conflict. 7, dialogue. And then 8 is description. 9, theme. And then the last one, world building.
Well, I'll talk about purpose.
There you go.
Okay.
Is that okay? So, the purpose of my book was to tell my parents' story during World War II, because growing up, I had no idea. My sisters and I had no idea what happened to my father during World War II. He was a navigator on a B-17 bomber out of England, bombing Germany, and he was shot down, bailed out, captured in a German prison camp, eventually evacuated and rescued and taken to France. But I only know that now. My parents never, ever talked about World War II while we were growing up or their experiences. So what happened is when my mother died, I found a box of letters and I found a box of documents, telegrams, government stuff, prisoner of war records, and sat down and went, what happened? So I had to spend a good 2 years putting this whole story together. And the purpose for me was to tell his story and find out what happened. And it took a lot of research because I couldn't ask him. If I would have thought about this 20 years ago, I could have asked him. But the purpose was to tell his story as accurately as I could without knowing the full story. And in terms of
asking him might not have worked. I asked my father,
right,
and he wouldn't talk about it. So
was he World War II?
World War II. And my wife's dad wouldn't talk about it. So
nope.
Yeah, they didn't want to talk about it. It was very
not talk about it. It was horrible, and I had no idea. And once they came back, like my parents, they put it out of their mind and never talked about it. So for me, the purpose was to get this story figured out and to write a book for his children, his grandchildren, and now his great-grandchildren on what happened. And so that was the purpose. But for me, I had to get it right. You know, where was his plane? Where did it go down? And to get it accurate, I actually went to the air base in England where he was at, met with the curator, and learned to look through these documents and talk to people to get it the true story. And then this last fall, I went to the prison camp in Barth, Germany, and met with the curator there and heard the stories and looked at their documents. I just wanted to make sure there's a story around it, but I wanted the historical events and what he was doing and where he was at to be as authentic as possible. Because when I met people, if you're writing something historical, you meet people who are such experts. You know, they'll just focus on, no, it wasn't this day, it was that week, it was that year, it was this place. So I wanted to make it as authentic as I could.
Excellent.
If I could make a word about research, but not from my experience, but I once had a partner who was and still is an historian. And I used to watch her do her research and writing books on 19th century France, her specialty area. And it just blew me away how meticulous and how much incredible effort is required in doing just the things that were just described, going to the primary records and going to the physical places. And you know, they teach graduate students in history about historical methods. I think they call it historiography, And so the whole methodology or methodologies behind how to do research and how to piece it all together,
Right.
it was too much for me. I guess got to say that much.
Well, I had to get mine right, and the first thing I did, historiography, is get the timeline. And then you can put the events in, but it just did not have value to me unless I got it right. And that meant primary sources, going to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., and getting every plane that went down in World War II has a report. And you can get these, they're handwritten and you can read them. Those are good primary sources if you're going to write history, something that's historical.
Well, Clarence, what was your purpose in writing your book?
Which one? Armageddon.
Armageddon.
Armageddon was
Such a
I wrote,
popular topic.
I wrote multiple books, but Armageddon, it was one of those things where I just couldn't I couldn't shake. It was because I've had two other books that are religious that I had thoughts come into my head, and when they came into my head, I knew what the whole story was about before I even wrote it. From beginning, middle to end, I was like, okay. So as I was writing Armageddon, I'm like, okay, well, where did the Battle of Armageddon take place? So it came to me that it was Israel. I'm like, is it? So then I started researching that. And then that's when I looked it up, and it did happen in Israel on the hill of Megiddo. So I was like, okay, that's not bad. And then I have another book called Erebus the Ranger, where there's a medieval like fantasy. So I'm like, okay, well, that's cool. I'll just write that. But then I'm like, and medieval, I'm like, how did they say bathrooms or everything? Can't just put they went to the bathroom or anything. So I had to really research that, and it's called the garderobe. And that's what the bathrooms were. It was when someone went to the bathroom and someone used a shovel to kind of put in a pile and everything.
Okay.
Thank you for helping me.
How did you find that information, Clarence?
I had to literally had to look it up on the internet, and I had to do tons of research between for Armageddon. It was between the Bible. I was constantly. That's what took me so long to write the book. I was constantly going from page by page by page, putting the Bible verses into the book, and then going back and forth, and then looking on Google and trying to find okay, the location. Well, what airport is this nearby in Israel or in medieval times? Well, what was this? Well, how did they pronounce this word? How did they pronounce bathrooms? How did they pronounce taverns or bars or stuff like that, and everything of that nature? I had to do tons of research for all that.
Thank you. Has anyone, because of research, what was the most, why I say this? Did it involve travel? Did you have to visit a place just to authenticate that this is something existing?
I think research is different for everyone. In my case, it's based on my experience as a physician and my experience as an environmental science teacher. And so when I wrote my books, I went back to that knowledge, and I didn't really require research. All these other topics obviously required some great deal of research. Barbara had a lot of research to do for hers. But I think research is something that everyone has to do, but it's different for everyone. And everyone has to describe it for themselves.
One of the tools I've been thinking about is, again, talking about, say, mid-19th century France. I read the novels that were written at that time, the fiction novels that were written at the time, because they give you a view of, what's in the guy's suitcase? Where does he go to the bathroom? What does he do for work? What's it look like outside his window? And I found that very, very valuable. And it's one thing to go into the history books to find out events and timing, but to get a feel and to flesh out a character and see what they do in their everyday life, I found that reading novels from the period actually helps.
I was lucky in that my dad was in real places, and I got on a plane and I went to England and found the air base, and luckily they have a little museum there. And I cannot even tell you guys what it was like for me to go out and stand on the runway. The runways are still there. And the guy who has the museum said, nothing has been built here. So every time your dad got up in that B-17, he went that way, and this is what he saw. And I can't even tell you how moving that was for me to stand there and to think about him. And so for me, that was a good thing to do. And I did the same at the prison camp in Germany. In fact, when I was at the prison camp in Germany, after the war, they just bulldozed down the camp, the prison camp, and in the ground were little bits of brick from the barracks and stuff. And so the guy who was with me, the curator of the museum, kicked around in the dirt and found some little pieces of brick for me. And I can't tell, I just cherish these little pieces of brick. You know, it's just this link to the story. So that was worth it to me. Worth it to me. If you're writing quite a personal story, go to the source, go to the place.
How about Reverend Lavery? Can you describe how you've done your research for your book?
Well, of course, I was writing it from chapter 8 of the book of Matthew. I wanted to write about the centurion whose servant was healed. So I wanted to write a story about that centurion. So I had to do some serious research into Roman soldiers, how they were trained, how they fought, what comprises a legion, different mannerisms of fighting, different types of weapons that were used. And I also learned something that was very interesting that I never knew, and that was not only were Roman soldiers taught in the art of battle, but they were also taught how to construct things. They were also taught how to build. When you go into some of these far-flung reaches of the empire and you find roads that connect the empire, those roads they didn't call in Palumbo. They didn't call in the Department of Streets and Sand. Those roads were built by Roman soldiers. When you go to England and you see Hadrian's Wall, which is built across the entire width of the island, that wall was built by Roman soldiers. Of course, now the only part of Hadrian's Wall that exists is basically the foundation of it. Hadrian's Wall, when it was constructed, it actually looked like the Great Wall of China. You know, about every 200 feet there was a parapet place for soldiers to guard. There were forts, there were barracks, there were all kinds of supportive structures, and all this was built by Roman soldiers. And when you learn all these things and then you incorporate these things into the life of your main character, it gives him a realistic sense. He's not just a man whose servant was healed. He becomes a person with whom you can relate. And whenever you write any type of book, whether it's historical or historical fiction, the main character has to be relatable to the reader, or the story won't mean anything. It won't mean a thing. So yeah, it took a lot of research. And of course the biblical research concerning the crucifixion and ways in which prisoners were prepared for crucifixion and how crucifixion killed you. I mean, all these things are basically there. How they disposed of the bodies after, most people don't realize that on many of these hills of crucifixion, if nobody came to get you, They just took you down and they buried you right there on the hill of crucifixion. Most of these hills of crucifixion, when archaeologists actually dug down into the earth, they found skeletal remains of individuals who had been crucified, but nobody claimed them. So they just dug a hole through them and covered them up right there. And their bodies were buried right there on the hill. We look at Jesus. When we see Jesus being crucified, we see him carrying this huge cross. In most cases, when an individual is crucified, the only part of the cross that they really carried was about a 75-pound beam that was placed over their shoulders, and their arms were tied to it. And they carried, it was called a patribulum, and they carried that patribulum up to the hill of crucifixion. And on that hill of crucifixion, there would be what's called a stipe, an upright. And they would just pull you up onto that upright, and there was like a mortise joint in there. They'd slide the patribulum into this mortise joint and tie it with rope, and there you would hang until you finally succumbed. It makes you appreciate when you read about the crucifixion and the various ways in which a person was crucified and the mode by which it killed you. It makes you appreciate the love of Jesus Christ for us, and that he was found not guilty, and yet he endured those things. So there is quite a bit of, even in a historical fiction, there's a lot of research that has to be done. A lot of research. Time consuming.
I can only imagine. Yeah. Okay. Why don't we go back to the 10 elements? Dr. Russ Hill, what part of the 10 elements do you want to talk about?
Maybe description. When I wrote this Buffy book, as an environmental science teacher, I wanted to, it was written for children, and I wrote this story about the cat and the girl and how everything was caused by their environment. And I go through all the things that caused the illness and got to the happy ending where the veterinarian found the problem and the cat eventually became healthy. I had my daughter, who's also a teacher, read it, and she goes, "It's a great story, but it's kind of boring." So I said, "What can you do with it?" And she put it to rhyme. And when she made it, so it's basically a 28-page poem that reads really great. And so I guess the description, the way that I wrote, I got the story right, but I needed her to make it read and flow as a descriptive piece of work. And everyone who's reviewed it has said it's fantastic. And I gave it to a couple of neighbor kids or parents for their kids, and they tell me that their kids wanted to read it every night because of the poetic nature of it, not more than the story. The story is important for kids. We have to teach kids to save our environment, because my generation and probably most of yours behind me have screwed it up. So we need to educate kids about how to improve the environment, how to reduce pollution and that kind of stuff. So without my daughter, who was a language arts teacher, putting it to rhyme, it probably wouldn't be half the book that it is. So, and then we had a college friend do all the illustrations, and the illustrations are amazing. She was an art student who turned environmental student at college. So I got the best of both worlds from her. But yeah, so description, it's got to flow, I guess, is the bottom line. And I wasn't good enough to make it happen, so I brought in my daughter.
Nice. Yeah. Well, description it also involves about illustration, right? And I'm a visual learner, and there are different people who learns differently.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Actually,
illustration
most
helps
people
a
are
lot.
visual learners. Yeah, most people are visual
Oh,
learners. Yeah, probably 80% are visual learners. And in my case, the illustrations back up the story. But of course, I don't know if you're writing a novel, you can't do it all in pictures. You got to do it in words. You got to be able to make those flow, I would think. I'm not a novel writer, so I don't know. I don't have a good enough imagination. I'm too based in science.
that's cool. Okay. Um,
But thank
who
you for
else
asking.
wants? You are much welcome. How about the rest? Out of the 10, elements when writing historical fiction, what do you guys want to talk about? So we have purpose, research, the setting, the characters, plot, conflict, dialogue, description, theme, and world building. Why don't we ask Clarence, how did you come up with your characters, Clarence? What did you consider? Yeah, those kind of stuff.
Well, characters are always usually hard for me. Like the names and everything are pretty much hard. Like, well, because it's different for me. Like when I write like religious books than what it is with like just regular everyday fiction books. Because fiction, I can kind of like just kind of go wild and kind of like, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this. Whereas in religious, I kind of keep to like a certain like standpoint and try to keep like on a certain like barriers and guidelines with it, well, my own kind of like guidelines of how I think I should be. So the characters, it's like they just kind of like made up like the characters like at random. The setting was kind of like a little bit more trickier because like even though I read like what was in the Bible, I was like yeah, it's fine if it's in the Bible, but I didn't really need to kind of like almost kind of like really push it out there and like describe like it in such a way that people almost kind of really can actually see it and feel it and kind of like really feel like what the characters would be feeling and the tenseness, the frightfulness, the fear, the determination, the urgency to kind of try to like escape everything and trying to figure out what's really going on.
Okay, well, guys, I really appreciate your participation, and it has been an interesting topic. It's already an hour, and I still have like a few questions here, but it's okay. And I hope you guys enjoyed our session for today, and see you on our next roundtable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
you,
you.
guys.
Good night.
Did it get any better?
Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers.
Experience is not about the publisher, it is about us, the authors.